Tanse, I'm Creeson Agecoutay. Welcome to APTN National News. Members of 6 First Nations in Manitoba evacuated by wildfires and smoke have begun heading home. The Canadian Red Cross says it is still supporting more than 2,300 people from Cega'kin Nation. At one point, thousands of citizens from 7 First Nations in Manitoba were spread throughout the province. Last Wednesday, the Canadian Armed Forces brought in Hercules airplanes to evacuate Cega'kin Nation. The Red Cross says it is working with Indigenous Services Canada to support the return home for 6 other First Nations. According to the latest data from Indigenous Services Canada, more than 5,200 people are currently evacuated from 9 First Nations, including 2 in Saskatchewan. Families in Carry the Kettle, Cega'kin Nakoda Nation, just east of Regina, are mourning the loss of their loved one this week. According to RCMP on Sunday, 18-year-old Keilia Windigo was shot and killed at her 18th birthday party in the town of Wolseley. The incident happened at around 4 a.m. Sunday morning at a home in Wolseley. Indian Head RCMP received a report of a shooting. They pronounced Windigo dead when they arrived on scene. Her family says Keilia just graduated from high school last June and had plans to go to university in the fall to become a forensic scientist. A male youth from Carry the Kettle, who cannot be named because of his age, was arrested and is facing 10 charges, including manslaughter with a firearm and 6 counts of weapons possession. He made his first court appearance on Tuesday and will be back in court in Fort Capel today. A GoFundMe page with a goal to raise $9,000 for Windigo's funeral costs has been set up by a family friend. Gerald Hill is Wolseley's mayor. He shares his condolences with the family who moved into the town less than a year ago.
You know, something that was supposed to be a celebration turned into a tragedy. And unfortunately, it's a tragedy for both families. I know that it's really left our community reeling as to why, why is this kind of stuff happening? And, had a couple of young kids there that, their lives are over, for all intents and purposes. And there's got to be a reason behind it. And that's what we're struggling with.
Australia has just released its own report on murdered and missing Indigenous women and children. First announced in 2021, the inquiry was granted 3 extensions before releasing its final report on August 16th. The 227-page report looks at data factors driving violence and police culture, among other things. While data was inconsistent, it found there is a high and grossly disproportionate number of disappeared and murdered First Nations women and children. Australian officials received guidance from commissioners of Canada's MMIWG National Inquiry on how to conduct their own. The report makes 10 recommendations. Senator Dorinda Cox was the only Indigenous senator on the committee. She hopes the report honors the lives lost and the loved ones and communities impacted by systemic failures. The senator says the report does not go far enough.
We've heard from loved ones who felt silenced and forgotten, and of the losses of dignity and humanity, and in too many cases, the loss of life. This report is about deliberate actions and failures of a system that has at its heart racially and gendered violence. It is in fact the form of genocide when the system doesn't properly respond to save the lives of First Nations people. And there must continue to be outrage about this happening in a modern-day country like Australia. We simply don't know how many First Nations women and children have been murdered or continue to be missing because we don't capture any of that necessary data. The majority of the report does provide some suggestions, but there are and continue to be no targets, no performance indicators to hold anyone to account if this important data cannot be gathered.
A 3-day transformative reconciliation gathering concluded at the River Cree Casino and Resort in the Cega'kin Nation near Edmonton yesterday. The event attracted some big names to learn from each other and to talk about reconciliation. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
People from across Alberta, Canada, and the U.S. were in Enoch Cree Nation the past 3 days. The fourth transformative reconciliation gathering offered guest speakers for young people and for all ages. Joanne Lethbridge-Pompana is from the Red Road Healing Society, a nonprofit that teaches traditional values. She created the gathering to help people find more about themselves and to learn from others.
We don't need a lot of stuff, but we do need to figure out who we are and where we come from and what our relationship is to Creator, how we define Creator, and how we find Creator in each and every one of us. We are medicine for each other when we hold up that mirror, when we reflect those values: love, courage, honesty, generosity, chastity, silence, respect.
There were workshops ranging in topics from transformative justice to housing initiatives, offering knowledge across all 3 days. Former chief of the Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation, Rod Alexis, spoke about the history of tribal law.
I like these workshops, these appreciations where we could, share with each other how it is. And some of the things that we do are tradition or culture, the things that the gifts that the Creator gave us as First Nation people. We have to maintain that.
Dr. Clifford Cardinal spoke of ways to cleanse the tailings ponds in the oil sands. He says everyone can learn something here.
All this knowledge is here for us. We don't have to look. There are some key speakers here from the Mohawk people, very new information that I learned,
This is Gladys McDonald's second time attending. She says she will be back for the next gathering.
It's unbelievable what the 2 days that I've been here is wow. And I look with who I'm sitting with around the table, and I just think, this light went off. This is what the elders meant when I was growing up. How in the future kind of prepared me into being who I am today at my age, we say elders and that. And this is what we have to teach our children.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Enoch Cree Nation, Alberta.
A First Nation in the Yukon has been waiting to fulfill its land use planning rights for over 2 decades. Now that plan is finally in the works. But as Sarah Connors tells us, the First Nation's efforts to have it completed in a timely manner is being slowed down by the territorial government. Here's that story.
The Cega'kin First Nation is located in Dawson City, Yukon. For the last 5 years, they've been working with the territorial government to complete the Dawson Regional Land Use Plan. The plan, guaranteed in the First Nation's final agreement, covers almost 40,000 kilometers, or 10% of the Yukon. Once completed, the plan will balance natural resource management, like mineral development, while also protecting Cega'kin's rights, title, and interest.
From an Aboriginal perspective, it's protecting the environment, ensuring that we have the ability to harvest resources out of the land.
The Dawson Regional Planning Commission is an independent body of Yukon community members tasked with developing a plan for the region. It provided a recommended plan to both governments in 2022. The governments were then asked to determine whether to accept, reject, or modify the recommended plan. The First Nation submitted its recommendations in April, but says the territory has asked for multiple extensions to submit theirs.
But Yukon so far has not provided their submission. So in that sense, the commission is sitting in limbo, and we can't proceed or move this issue.
The First Nation says the government told them one of their holdups is that it's legally obligated to consult with the neighboring White River First Nation.
We shouldn't be held hostage around their duty to consult with White River, and I'm not truly understanding in the legal context why they have that obligation.
In a statement to APTN News, a government spokesperson said, "We will deliver our response to the recommended plan to the Commission once we have completed our consultation with affected Yukon First Nations, including White River First Nation. And we remain committed to a timely process and are investing the time needed to complete a thorough review of the recommended plan, including consideration of all pertinent views and information." But the Tronduk Gwitchin feels the territory isn't taking the matter seriously.
Rather, we see unnecessary and lengthy delays such that we can only assume that this process is not a priority for public government.
The government says it expects to submit its proposed modifications to the Commission this fall. Once the Commission gets them, it can start drafting a final plan. It's not yet clear when that final plan will be released. Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
The Inuit have a new support center in the city of Winnipeg. We'll take you on a tour when we come back in about 3 minutes. Stay with us. An urban Inuit nonprofit in Winnipeg opened the doors of their new 18,000 square foot space in the city's north end this week. Since opening in 2019, Tunasugit has become a hub for Inuit in Winnipeg, transitioning from northern to city life. Reporter Sierra Bettens takes you on a tour of the new facility.
Tunasugit is the organization Nikki Komak-Sutisak wishes she had when she moved to Winnipeg from Chesterfield Inlet, Nunavut, as a child.
Living here in the city of Winnipeg and not really having access to culture and language growing up made it really difficult for me to have my culture and hold up my culture. So if I was going through that, that meant a lot of other Inuit who were living in the city were also going through that.
Decades later, she is the executive director of Tunasugit, a nonprofit that helps Inuit transition to life in the city by accessing services and cultural programming.
We opened our doors May 4th of 2019. We started with 1 staff member with a board of directors, and today we have about 26 staff, a healthy board of directors, and a beautiful space that we just moved into here.
Dunasugit means welcome in Inuktitut. After 5 years in the community, the organization has expanded from its modest location in the West End to an 18,000 square foot space in the North End. It's a first week of drop-in programming at the new space, where country food and community connections await those who walk through their doors. Youth Program Manager Maxine Engu and lead community lounge helper Pudlu are gearing up to host youth programming in the basement.
They'll be doing throat singing, learning how to play Inuit games, art, floor hockey you could play down here. I mean, this space is specifically going to be for the Inuit Youth Program, and all of our community events we usually hold once a month.
Some elements, like the bingo board, will be kept, while the rest of the space will be repurposed.
Our small space, we couldn't have any events there. It was way too small. We were operating out of 3 separate buildings, so we often had to rent community space. But so that's a big game changer now that we're here. We have our own space. We don't have to pay for other space.
According to the 2021 census, just under 500 Inuit live in Winnipeg. However, thousands travel to the city every year to access services like medical care and educational opportunities. Oftentimes, when Inuit move to Winnipeg, Komaksutisak says they encounter barriers right away.
Not able to retrieve identification and not being able to get that form of identification, then there were just a ripple effect into so many other barriers that are associated with that, not being able to find housing, not being able to, go apply for various social programs, job searches.
In the new space, Inuit can access laundry services, sewing stations, a donation closet, and computers to connect to services.
We have computers set up for community members. They can do job search, they can look for housing, other programs they might be searching for.
As they expand programming in the new facility, Komaksutisak says they're also advocating for more policy changes aimed at removing barriers for Inuit in Winnipeg.
Not only are we a non-for-profit organization supporting our community, but we're in the background also changing legislation and policy to include Inuit, which is exactly what it is that we need to do to support our community.
Once renovations are complete, she says they plan to host their official grand opening in the new space in September. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Thank you, Sierra. A new graphic novel hopes to show that there isn't one right way to grieve after a family member goes missing. The story Little Moons explores the emotions that can come up while waiting for answers. Sav Jones sat down with author Jen Storm to find out more.
When a loved one goes missing, your heart searches for them everywhere.
I had lost somebody in an MMIWG scenario, and I felt a lot of those things. Like, I felt like there was a presence. I would feel like lights flickering, and you're just looking for that connection also, I think. So I really wanted to write about that experience.
Upcoming graphic novel Little Moons explores the different ways grief can affect the relatives of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Ojibwe author Jen Storm says though the story isn't based on her personal experience, it's a subject that's all too common within the Indigenous community.
Grief was important to me because I think that was a really hard thing for me to experience, and I know it's hard for other families to experience that have to deal with MMIWG because not everyone's found, right? And so there's this like weird grief that you go through, I think. When you're expecting the worst news, you kind of already know, but you don't have the answers or the mourning or the body or whatever it is.
Through vivid colors and thought-provoking illustrations by Ryan Howe and Alice R.L., Little Moons follows 13-year-old Rihanna while she watches her immediate family deal with the disappearance of her older sister, Chelsea. Rihanna feels abandoned by her mother, who leaves their reserve to live in the city when emotions get too difficult to handle.
If you lost a daughter, you know what I mean? Like, you don't know what would go through your mind, or how you would cope, or maybe that's the best she could do. So it's like, I kind of wanted that to be in there because I know people don't react ideally, they react humanly.
Despite the pain, there's also hope found within Little Moons. Rihanna finds strength and comfort in connecting with spiritual practices.
It was really important to me for the main character to really have that connection to her community and her traditions, and to find comforts, and then also have that parallel of her mother who felt she had to run away from it.
Storm says the title was inspired by her own son's experience of seeing her late childhood friend.
My son was, I think, 2, not even, and he was in his crib, and I went up to him and he was saying, I saw Auntie, and he's never met her. And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean you met Auntie? And he's like, she was here, like, and he kept, like, he was insisting. And I just kind of played along, and I was just like, well, what did Auntie look like then? And he was like, she looked like Little Moons. So that was like, oh.
Storm hopes that Little Moons can be a resource for any person, young or old, who is struggling with losing a loved one. Readers can find it on store shelves when it comes out September 3rd. Sav Jonesa, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
For years, traditional powwow dancer Mike LaLiberty was a staple at many powwows across the prairies. Sadly, he passed away earlier this week. We'll tell you more about the lives he's touched when we come back. Over on the East Coast, St. John's 15, Fredericton 19. Cartwright 16, Nujuak 15. Cega'kin 16, Gasp 16 as well. Sarnia 22, Ottawa 20. Timmins 24, Sunny and Big Trout Lake at 23. God's Lake 24, Puckatawagan 17. Brandon 20, Barons River 20 as well. Regina, it's 18, North Battleford 16. La Ronge 15, Meadow Lake 14. Sunny in Fort McMurray 21, High Level 21 as well. Calgary 22, Red Deer 27. Kamloops 28, Bella Coola 24. Smithers 23, Dees Lake 16. Watson Lake 17, Old Crow 13. Fort Simpson 21, Norman Wells 15. Colville Lake 15, Inuvik 17. Chesterfield 13, Cambridge Bay 14. In Arctic Bay 6, Aglulik 12. Mike LaLiberty could be called a fixture on the Powwow Trail. Everyone knew him, and sadly he passed away earlier this week. He leaves a great void, and stories about him are already being shared by many. Mike lived on Fishing Lake First Nation in Saskatchewan, but as Nelson Bird reports, his home was wherever he was able to share Indigenous culture.
Every powwow has its regulars. Sometimes they're in the audience, others are singing. And if you've been on the Powwow Trail, you've definitely seen this dancer.
Hi, this is Mike LaLiberty.
Mike LaLiberty was known to many at powwows and away from them. He died suddenly on August 19th, leaving a varied legacy, one that includes helping to create the annual First Nations University Powwow, which began in 1979. Mike spent many years in justice as a probation officer, helping hundreds get their lives back on track, including his lifelong friend and fellow dancer, Ray Turk Desjardins, who in the early 80s found himself on probation.
And then I used to see him at powwows. I go, oh, I forgot to report last week. He says, well, you're at the powwow, you just reported.
In First Nation tradition, Mike was adopted into several families, the Favels among them. Journalist Mick Favel learned ceremonial ways directly from Mike.
When I got to learn from him and start hanging out with him personally and having one-on-ones with him, you could really, he felt like, you were like the only person in the whole world.
Everyone has a special memory of Mike, but they can all agree his smile and his humor was one of a kind.
He'd come up with stuff on the spur of the moment, and we're always laughing and joking, and teasing is a big part of us.
Online tributes are pouring in for the loss of someone most people looked up to. His partner of 10 years, Rhonda Casius, wrote, "My love was called home to the spirit world today. We had the best 10 years together. I'm going to miss you, my love." Mike LaLiberty leaves behind dozens of family members and countless friends. His buddy Turk sums up his best friend in 3 words:
loving, caring, and forgiving.
In Regina, I'm Nelson Bird.
Our sincerest condolences to the LaLiberty and Longman family. That is your midday newscast for this Thursday, August 22nd. Dennis Ward is here for your evening national newscast in a few hours. Make sure to join us again at 5 p.m. Winnipeg time. From everyone at APTN National News, Masicho Miigwech, hi hi. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again.